what I think is the next step beyond, like literally seeing with our tool V0 that we're building, which is a tool that can generate apps from prompts. And we're seeing that the impact is actually bigger for all the other roles. Let's say you're PM and your job used to be that you describe to a designer kind of what your vision is, and then they come back and they kind of show you something. And, no, not like that. I want something else, right? V0 is really good at design. And so you can just type your prompt and it will give you something back and you kind of iterate on it for however long you want. And now you have a working prototype, even though you don't know how to code.
Hey everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Leadership Exchange. I am so excited to be here today. My name's Tracy. You can follow me on Twitter at LadyLeet or on LinkedIn at Tracy S. Lee. Malte, do you think I should switch to saying X now? I feel like maybe it's the time.
It's very optional, I think.
So I'd love to go ahead and introduce my guest today, Malte Ubl, who is the CTO at Vercel. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. And Malte, we know each other from your Google days. Gosh, I can't remember where was it like during maybe it was during the PWA / lit / all,
It might be. It's been a long time. Might have been a JS conf or something like that.
Yes. I feel like we'll call those pre-COVID days.
That's right. It was definitely very pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID days. Yes. And it's so exciting to see you at Vercel now. I mean, Vercel has definitely done an amazing job at just hiring so many amazing leaders in the tech community, including yourself. And I know you guys are going viral right now with a billboard. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, yeah, there actually were a few of those, but the one I personally like a lot is it just says you can just ship things,
Mm-hmm.
which obviously you can put into all kind of comical circumstances with respect to physical shipping, but it's really our philosophy that we want to bring to the world is how teams can ship software with higher velocity
Mm-hmm.
and with kind of fewer things in the way of the engineer writing the code and it eventually getting shipped out of the door.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I'm going to SF in a few weeks, so I'm going to be looking for, there should be, you guys should create an app. You know how there's in SF, there's a poop app. You've seen that, right? Where you can see
Oh my
where all the
goodness.
poop is. There's like a poop meter. And so you should have like a Vercel billboard meter. And, maybe like, people go visit the Android statues at Google, right? And the Apple
Right.
flagship campus, but then people can go visit the billboards by Vercel too. That would
Yeah.
be really fun.
There's a lot of, they're very accessible because they're just out there.
Yeah, I love that. Well, okay, so I know you quite well, but I think other people don't. So can you tell us a little bit just like about your experience at Google and kind of what you're doing at Vercel now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the CTO now for Vercel. It's been 3 years.
Hmm.
I love it. Before that, I was at Google for 12 years. And kind of at Google, I initially joined a team working on front-end infrastructure. So I built a framework called Wiz, which is running essentially every Google consumer web app out there. Um, it actually was always kind of, it wasn't secret, but wasn't really talked about. But recently it was announced at like the Angular conference that they were merging it with Angular. I'm actually not sure how true that actually is in practice, but it's so that's what I did. I also built something else called Bach, which was it's a kind of microservice orchestration system, and in particular, the part I worked on is the way how we ship web apps at Google. So that's kind of my background and kind of the kind of broader front-end infrastructure roles I had, which connect to what I'm doing now at Vercel. I later then joined the search team. My last year there, I was actually kind of running the desktop search team, so search on laptops and whatever, like probably use this today on your browser. And it was a really fun year because I was basically tasked to revive the search product on these devices because like literally for 7 years the company had only focused on mobile, and so people had just kind of shipped things on desktop because it was free, but they never really tried if they were good or if it actually was working so particularly well. So we had basically a year of like catching up because the company realized, holy crap, I've been like, you know, people there might be more users on mobile, but it's so normal that you say, hey, I'm gonna shop for a dress, but wow, it's really expensive. I'm gonna think about it, and at night I'm sitting on my laptop, and now I'm gonna pull the trigger. And even more like for I don't know for a, like larger expense laptop or something where you have to research a lot, travel, all these things. Laptops are actually really key to that whole journey, right? So the company started investing more, and I got to like just ship lots of things in 1 year because we had this entire backlogs of things that hadn't been uh, shipped because no one cared about this stuff. At the same time, we didn't even have metrics. I had to build everything from scratch, and so that was a great learning experience how to like get to like a to have this like billion user product to be truly like something that we can actually execute on with high velocity. Um,
Yeah, that's
Really
really
fun.
cool. I mean, because I know at Vercel, it's all about shipping things and shipping things fast. And I mean, to hear about your last year at Google and what you were able to accomplish is amazing. So, what do you think holds most organizations back from being able to ship fast? Is it process, leadership, mindset? Is it something deeper?
Yeah, obviously many factors. I've I think process is a big part of it for sure. One, and we can dive deeper into that topic, but like that, I really care about this like notion of approvals and how to actually decide that something actually goes out of the door. That's obviously is a big part, but you have to get there first, right? So there is this entire kind of things that have to become true so that I finally can make the decision to ship. And so we're certainly like as a company engaging not on all of these, but like on the vast majority of them and trying to make all these steps a little bit faster.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit deeper on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, if you like the way, I mean, at the micro level, like it starts with, I guess, this notion of iteration velocity, which I really like. In fact, so in long time ago when Eric Schmidt was still at at, at Google as CEO, he always used to say that revenue solves all known problems. And I always was like, is that actually true, right? And if you like look at Google today, where like there's like antitrust and stuff, like
That's like,
those are like problems that don't go away if you make more
right.
money. So
But
like he was
it is that whole idea, right? Like money solves all your problems.
right.
Money can help ease the pain of problems, I suppose.
That's right. I derived this quote from there, which is that iteration velocity solves all known software problems. And I think that's actually it's literally true, right? Like you because if you think about what actually is hard in software engineering, it's that you don't perfectly know where you want to go, and the only known solution is that make a quicker incremental step towards that, and then figure out if you're moving the right direction and then adjust direction, right? And so iteration velocity is both the iteration speed, but also the like notion of velocity as a vector of saying like, is the speed pointing actually in the right direction, right? And so what I like to do is kind of deconstruct the software development process into multiple steps and see like what is actually inhibiting iteration velocity at each of these steps. And so like it starts with, we make this framework called Next.js, and one thing we really care about is what's called HMR. I don't even want to say what that stands for. It doesn't matter. It's what happens when you type into your like text editor, and then uh, you hit save, and you see the update in your screen immediately, right? In the olden days, you might have to like maybe even compile, but then certainly go to the browser, maybe hit reload, right, and see, oh no, it's not what I wanted. Okay, I'm going to go back, right? And if that takes 30 seconds or even longer, right, could have taken even longer, then you're on this like super slow cycle. Whereas if you essentially in real time see these changes, you can these like micro interactions become really fast, right? Another thing that we care about and we built at Vercel is that this notion that whenever you push a change to whatever Git provider you're using, GitHub, Bitbucket, etc. We pick up that change and we build a preview deployment of your application. And you can now you can send that application to your colleague, and they can see the app with your changes in their entirety on that preview deployment. And then we were like, hey, what do people do? They make screenshots, they paste them into Linear or Jira or Slack, but they're kind of out of context. You never know where they were. You don't know where the browser is. So we built a commenting feature similar to what you would. It's most closely like what you see in Figma, but also Google Docs obviously had kind of innovated in the space. So people get kind of like give inline direct feedback. And then once again, they give feedback in the context of the product. You actually know what they wanted you to change, you know what it is. And so you can, that little interaction of like how to give feedback is now faster, right? And so you have a faster process. And then maybe there's many more to these, but like the last one, basic, for example, being how do you actually ship it? Um, and one thing certainly that like Google's embracing in essentially all of big tech is that you have this notion of feature flags where you hide your change behind a flag, but that means it can go to production ASAP, right? And rather than having like these long-lived branches where people review them and then there's like this big launch day, you should never ship like at the there should never be deployment at the moment where you ship, just flipping a flag, right? And so we've been investing a lot in feature flags. It's actually one of the things that I've when I left Google, I was very surprised actually by how immature the infrastructure was. Because there are these companies out there like LaunchDarkly and Statsig and you know whatever, lots of companies, but they all like APIs. They manage the flag, but they don't tell you how to program with a flag, and that's actually kind of difficult and not easy to get right. And so we were like, hey, let's do that. Like, let's only focus on how to program with feature flags and actually give people advice how to do it and streamline these processes. And so again, like that's we basically think through this entire chain of software development and kind of making every part of it a little bit faster.
Yes. I mean, I do have to say, I am a huge fan of the previews feature. It is amazing. It really helps business people, especially, right? Like interact with developers in a more, I don't know, harmonious manner, I would
Right.
say. So no, I love it so much. And Google, Amazon, companies like that, right? They're sort of this like philosophy in, how to do software, how to ship software and things like that. What do you think is the missing piece from everybody else outside of these large organizations? How do they reach that same level of efficiency?
Yeah, there is definitely a lot of nuance to that question, but
Hmm.
so what you can certainly say is that if you if you build an application that has scale, I think it's an important nuance. Scale, and that's effectively every consumer facing app. And it's even if you're in the B2B space, it's probably your top of funnel, but it's maybe not the app yourself, right? So that you cannot easily translate this way of doing experimentation, which is how Google and Meta and Amazon make their changes. Cannot easily translate that to a product that, quote unquote, only has a few thousand users, right? Which might be like a lot, right? Because you have a high revenue per user, but like there just isn't enough of them to make that statistical significance. But at the top of your funnel, and certainly if you are like consumer facing, if you're a web shop, etc., you can work in a similar manner. And then really it's the idea of bringing scientific experimentation to the core of your decision making and being able to make changes in a very incremental fashion and measure whether they're good or not. And that's actually something that's actually quite hard to do. And what I've seen a lot in like I mean actually before joining Google I was in consulting. I and I literally hear the same story now that people are excited about A/B testing or some variant of it. They run the A/B test and it fails in some manner, right? And I think that's where like you can see the maturity of a company in that space of how good they are at experimentation. And what I've seen is there's a huge drop off where some companies do it well and some like almost everyone else doesn't do it well. It really comes down to basically primarily like once you get data. So one really interesting fact from my time at Google is, I mean, I don't have like unfortunately the precise percentage, but at least 25% of the time we would run an experiment, and we would run 10 experiments a week at least, right? So we do this all the time, right? Like, let's see, like literally every single CSS change would be an experiment. Or one line CSS change would never go out without one. And so we do it all the time, and like some substantial percentage of the time, there was some little mistake in the setup of the experiment that had a bigger effect than the experiment itself. So the output data was complete BS.
That's so
And
interesting.
and so obviously whether that bias in the data collection would go up or down is now completely
Uh-huh.
random, right? It doesn't depend on the experiment. And
Uh-huh.
but obviously like what happens when you get data? The data might be good.
Hmm.
Now the right instinct should be that's sus. Like like we should like look at why it's so good and really understand why. And maybe we just made a mistake collecting the data. And then on the other hand, if the data is bad, obviously still you still should be sus, right? You should still figure out like why. And like but humans are humans, right? Humans do look when
Hmm.
it's bad. They don't look when it's good because you get
Hmm.
confirmation bias, right? But you have to overcome the confirmation bias. And then if you figure out, okay, my experiment actually is bad, now I think that really shows like how mature you are as a company, what happens, right? And
Hmm.
what I've seen essentially all companies do, except like a very tiny bit, is that the sunk cost fallacy takes over, and you just don't dare to like you don't dare to tell your boss that data's bad, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And or they don't dare to tell their boss that they just wasted 6 months building something that has negative impact, right? And so what I see companies do is they do ship it, and but no, like it's bad. Like it's strictly negative to their business. So it's really interesting to kind of as an organization to see how can I become so mature that I'm actually able to to not ship something that has negative data.
Yes. That's in talking to you, I love talking to you because I just feel like you've been at such the forefront of so many just organizations that are at kind of like the bleeding edge of tech, right? And being able to work on some of these teams. And um it makes me reminisce on Silicon Valley and like what is the magic of Silicon Valley? We all everybody who's outside of the Silicon Valley, I think, looks at Silicon Valley and says, "Oh, these developers are better. They do software better. They do that better." But really, what is stopping everyone from being able to accomplish and achieve or build the way let's say organizations that you've been a part of have?
Yeah, I mean that's a it's a good question. I think there obviously are like certain things about Silicon Valley that are special in terms of talent density and so forth. But certainly with COVID, there has been like it like a an expansion of that talent pool, right? And both in terms of folks literally moving away and in terms of everyone else kind of getting closer. So there is a huge
Yeah.
opportunity. It's definitely, I mean, one of our goals at Vercel, and one of the opportunities that I saw that convinced me to leave Google and join Vercel is just because I did see that there is this kind of delta in like operational fidelity for our like very broadly online businesses because that could be many things, right? And the kind of the goal for the company to essentially productize some of the things that like if you work in a big tech Silicon Valley company, you kind of take for granted, right? So
Yeah.
that's why we're, for example, investing in feature flags, which are truly at the core of of all these Silicon Valley companies, and that's why we uh, kind of trying to get all this infrastructure, which if you're at Google, you join it and you take it for granted, right? And
Right.
there's in fact there are like thousands of people working on it.
Mm-hmm.
You've never even heard their name, but they are there, right? And so uh, we're basically trying to be kind of that hidden team for all the companies out there.
I love
Um,
that. Yeah, that's amazing. I want to jump on the topic of AI, but before that, I wanted to take a quick second and shout out to my team, This Dot, who is sponsoring this episode. So, if you don't know about This Dot Labs, we are experts in modern web development and consulting. We love kind of just turning innovative ideas into reality. So, been doing a lot of AI POCs. I feel like what consultancy is not these days, kind of talking about business strategy and helping leaders figure out should you actually do something with AI or are you just doing it to check a box? But besides that, we don't just build software. We really enjoy building partnerships. And, I think one of the key differentiators for us is just collaborating closely with the team. We do have Silicon Valley roots. So I was talking to Malta, I was talking to your sales team actually, and they said one of the biggest differences from us as a consultancy is we kind of understand Silicon Valley engineering culture, which I think is something rare, unless
Yeah,
you're in
absolutely.
Silicon Valley, of course. So I was kind of excited to hear that. So we do get to work with a lot of people, but check us out, visdot.co. That's THISDOT.co. And I wanted to go into the AI conversation. So AI is, do you think we'll ever stop talking about AI? Like,
Not for the time being, because I think it's such a broad topic, right? Like
yeah,
the POCs you're building are probably like AI software, right?
hmm
And so that's like
a lot of
it's something.
RAG, for example,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Hmm.
That's something I'm excited about. And also, I mean, I've given a bunch of talks recently about kind of how to, for as a company, decide what to do in the space.
Yeah.
And then on the
Yeah.
other hand, AI is completely disrupting how we build software.
Hmm.
So it's kind of coming to us from both sides, right? It's changing like how we work, and it does impact. I think for now, to a lesser extent, but probably that's actually going to dominate in the future, like the software that we're building, which is AI
Hmm.
software.
It's fun because I still remember the transition from having 10 million Google Maps and MapQuest printed out in my back seat,
Right?
right? To I don't know if you remember when Google released this feature, and I don't know if it was just in the Bay Area that they did this, but you could actually text message the address and it would give you directions via text. You know,
I definitely have not used that, but sounds
I mean,
like it
this
would have
was
been a
like
thing.
2000. I don't know. I mean, pre 2008, I suppose.
Yeah,
And then, moving to, okay, all of a sudden everything is Google Maps, right? Or Apple Maps. And, you have your phone with you and, all of a sudden everything is just available at your fingertips. So but the transition during that time, I feel like was just so seamless. Like all of a sudden it's just there. All of a sudden it's just in our lives. And that's kind of what I feel like AI is happening with AI. Like you see
it's
the transition, but you just adopt it and then, you exist, right?
absolutely. I think there's one thing like me in, let's say 2021. Like every like kind of person working on storage, if you would have asked them like, what's one thing that you know is true, they would have answered, people hate typing. And so people do things like they query to Google for hairdresser, right? And so Google has to guess, okay, they probably mean someone close to them that they could actually go to, right? They don't
Right,
want to like
right,
they don't want to know what a hairdresser is. Everyone already knows that, right? So that you have to
right.
like read between the lines a lot.
Yes.
And
Oh,
so
that's
almost
interesting.
all the work is in that type of reading between the lines because people
Mhm.
just make these like super ambiguous queries. And so ChatGPT comes along, and people are like, "This is so useful that even though I empirically hate typing, I'm
Yeah.
completely fine, kind of like basically gushing out my heart into the machine because it yields results that are useful, right?" And so
Yes.
to me, that shows like how great the value is because it overcomes this like again empirically existing hate of like typing, which
Right.
people have.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. And it's just interesting what you say about search as well, because I didn't think about that, right? Like when you do a Google search, and you type in hairdresser, do you mean hairdresser influencer? Do you mean hairdressers next to you? But Google knows because you guys have done so much reading in between the lines of,
That's right.
what people actually want. So that's really funny.
Yeah, and sometimes there's taps because the machine says we generally don't know if you want to know when the showtime is of the show, what the cast is, you know,
Yeah.
which year it was filmed, because literally all of these things, the person just types in Dr. House,
Yeah.
right? Or whatever, like, and you just couldn't know what they possibly want. Um, Obviously that like but people intuitively understand that if you type that into ChatGPT, it won't give you a good answer, right?
Yeah.
And so people
Yeah.
intuitively understand that they have to be a little bit more elaborate, but they get the value back that's worth being kind of elaborate.
It's so funny because they talk about prompt engineering, but I don't know if anybody ever coined the term search engineering, but
I mean, certainly on the SEO side, people
yeah.
try to engineer what's happening in the search engine.
Well, so as we've already said, right? Like AI is just clearly changing how we ship code, how developers write code. Um, what's the next level? So, you're a team, you're already using AI. What next?
I think so. There's like a baseline, right? Like you buy GitHub Copilot or you get Cursor, right? If you're a
Hmm.
little bit more ahead of the curve. And those are tools that are truly they're really designed to make the individual engineer in their job more efficient, right? And that's certainly like, that's interesting and good, but in a way, it's not transformative, right? Like it really just kind of changes, like it makes you maybe 10% faster, right? I don't know what the numbers are, but like something like that, right? Like where everyone's job is still the same as before, they just kind of a little bit better at it. Um, and so what I think is the next step beyond, and what we're like literally seeing with our tool V0 that we're building, which is a tool that can generate apps from prompts. So what we're seeing just organically happen, because we're a developer company, we built this for developers. We build it for front-end developers because that's our primary customers. And we're seeing that the impact is actually bigger for all the other roles. Um, So, and that is, I think, transformative for businesses in a very tangible way, where let's say you're PM and your job used to be that you describe to a designer kind of what your vision is, and then they come back and they kind of show you something. And, no, 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 not like that. I want something else, right? Um, V0 is really good at design, and so you can just type your prompt, and it will give you something back, and you kind of iterate on it for however long you want. And now you have a working prototype even though you don't know how to code, right? Similarly, if you're a
And you can
designer,
share the code with your developers and say, here's the code.
yeah, you see
Or
the code.
hey, edit it, share it with your designer, and your designer can make some inline changes to the CSS or whatever, and it's just done.
Exactly. It
Mm.
doesn't have to be perfect. That's why we call it V0, right? But it does get you started. But similarly, if you're a designer and you're super comfortable in Figma, and that's amazing place to be, right? But we call it code curious because we're not building a tool for people who like just want the Figma code and publish it. We do give you code, but you don't have to like understand it all the way, right? And so we give these people the ability to say, hey, put in your Figma file, and now you're giving uh, again a working prototype to the developer, right? Um,
Ooh. Yeah.
and
Are you saying
even
you
I
can
think,
import a Figma file into V0 and it'll
yeah,
build for you? Oh, I've
yeah,
never used that feature before. That's amazing.
yeah, we are actively working on this feature and everything. So that, I mean, it's been around for maybe 3 weeks or so, so it's relatively new.
Oh, okay. Because that is
Um,
cool. That is
yeah,
really cool.
and then
Okay.
finally, I think what's probably actually, and it's actually true for me because I'm. It's a long story why I work in the front end space, but I'm not personally a front end developer. And like, so if you give me a Figma file, I'm like, I could not even like my mind cannot possibly comprehend how I get that into HTML and CSS. Like I just couldn't do it. I can totally like tweak a little thing here or there, right? And so like if I'm a backend engineer or like a full stack engineer that is more at home on the backend side, this tool can build the UI for me, and that can actually it's really empowering that I'm suddenly able to like ship things end to end, and I can show you a demo that actually looks great. So and like, but my main point is that because all of these roles essentially become more horizontal, or sorry, more vertical, right? Like in the sense that like I'm a designer now I can code. I'm a back engineer now I'm a front engineer. Um, I'm a PM now I actually make production quality prototypes. That the notion of having more kind of full stack people in a company means that I can slim down processes. It doesn't mean I don't need the experts anymore because none of these steps are like maybe to the perfection that I'm like aiming to ship, but they're almost there, right? And so I don't need to like ping the designer because I just wanted to make this like little change. I can just prompt it, right? If I'm the backend engineer, I'm working with a front engineer and I just want to make a small change, I don't need to get the front engineers And maybe my process is that I have to like talk to the manager and they say, well, there's a sprint in 2 weeks that I can slot in, right? Like this entire step goes away. And I think that is actually very transformative for businesses.
Yes.
Even again,
Yes.
like you still need the same people for the expert work, but the transition between functions becomes more rare, and that just by its nature kind of really eliminates process
Hmm.
and increases velocity.
I think it's also the shared language, right? So a lot of times when you're working in organizations, right, like designers have their own language, developers have their own language, product managers, business people, et cetera, et cetera. But when you can just prompt something with V0 and get it developed or be able to visualize what you actually mean and share it with a developer, let's say, right, it makes the friction so much less,
Yeah,
which has
totally.
been super impactful.
It reminds me of this like kind of cool uh, review I once had at Google, where like someone like a designer was showing off her design, and it was a motion design,
Hmm.
and so I asked her like, "This is great, but can you actually is this a motion that we can kind of productize and turn into code?" And her reply was, "Yes, you can because I actually coded this up myself."
I
And
love that.
I love that, right? Like this, so QED, great. And so I think we'll be in that world more often where like you have a designer and they say, here's my design. And yeah, I mean I have a prototype. Again, like it might be not flashed out to the absolute last bit. Like there is work left to do.
Yeah.
But I've already proven that it's responsive. I've also like already done all the detail, right? Like it's I you get less into the situation where you have the function transition and the function transition says, great, you just worked on this for 4 weeks, but we can't possibly
Mhm.
implement this.
I am dying now to get my hands on this new feature where you can up I can't wait to see what happens if I could just upload a file into VZ and see what V0 does. In all the talks I gave last year, I was talking about RAG and V0 and AI and things like that. So I was using V0 in some of my talks and it was so much fun because you can tell V0 anything you want. So, one of my
Right.
talks I said, okay, make me two chatbots side by side. One is Kim Kardashian, one is Kanye West, and both chatbots should talk like those two people, right? And or like I'd say things like make it rainbow colored. Okay, more rainbows, more emojis. And those were the prompts I was giving it, but I could just again make something really fun and accessible. Great for great for young kids as well, or
Right.
kids who are learning how to code, because I think one of the most impactful things for me in my software journey back in, gosh, was it 2014 or 2015? This was kind of like when the age of Angular 2 beta was coming out, right? React Vue wasn't even on the scene yet. Ember was still popular, but this idea that I could just use a framework and get something up and going, and you had live reload, and I could deploy really quickly, right? Using something like Firebase, like all of those things were such new concepts, if you will. And you're talking about 10 years ago now, right?
Right.
And so this V0 is kind of, in my opinion, kind of like this next iteration of how empowering that felt, right? Like that wave of, I think it was like the 2014, 2015 timeframe where everybody decided to become a developer because all of a sudden it became way more accessible for people to actually be able to
Right.
do so.
Yeah, no, it's definitely on that path, right? We have
Yes.
this whole notion of personal software where it becomes so cheap to build certain types of software
Hmm.
that you make it for yourself. You
Yes.
never give it to anyone, right?
Yeah.
And there's actually an example. So my daughter was struggling with like some math thing in elementary
Hmm.
school, right? And so we just together made like a quiz software
Uh-huh.
that was quizzing her on these skills and like selected images as
Yes.
rewards that she loved, right? Um, Played some music. I wouldn't even know how to make a web page play music, but V0 does, right? Like
That's
it's
so cool.
and yeah,
Yeah.
so there's uh, for this type of app, you can build them end to end in V0 without any friction really.
Oh, I can't wait to mess around with something like that. I This reminds me of my dad. So my dad when I was my parents are engineers, and when I was younger, my dad for the weekends, he basically built this like script that would print out math problems. So he would, those math quizzes, like in 1 minute you have to answer, 50 questions and go as fast as you can.
Right.
Yeah, he learned, and so that those were my weekends. I was like, oh my gosh, what is the horrible program that's making me do all this stuff? But it's a completely new iteration. I'm actually going to do that for my 3-year-old and see if I can get him better at math. um, well, this was such a fun conversation, and we're out of time. But if you had to just give, one piece of advice to engineering leaders who are struggling to get their teams to ship faster, what would it be?
So one thing that definitely has been top of mind for me lately is
Mhm.
kind of this notion of how to make the decision to ship, right?
Mm.
And certainly at Google, like literally my job was to like I was like the last person who would sign off. And
Mhm.
most of my job was to say like, has everyone else signed off? And all of this was like an email-based process and it like certainly some of my peers, it would often take weeks to just get sign off or like there would be like a follow-up questions after 2 weeks, right? And then like all these things would be like so slow and so like I don't know, I hated it. And so like one of my goals at Vercel was really to change that culture. And so it actually on first thought sounds worse, but if you think about it for a second, it's better. So we switched from approvals to vetos. And so what that means is obviously you need someone from privacy and legal and security and leadership as well to they all should be happy with your launch, right? Um, and it turns out most of the time they are, but in the traditional process, you ask them and then they kind of eventually say yes or no, right? And so we kind of flipped that around and said, no, the default is you can just ship things or Billboard, right? You, the engineer, empowered to ship this. Your responsibility is that you follow process in posting to the Slack channel that people know you're going to do it, right? Like you can't just in secret ship things. But you can just ship things, and everyone else's responsibility is to say no, 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 that's actually not a good idea. But they have to be active, right? They have to like be convicted that they actually have something to contribute. If they are, on the other hand, say, cool. Like most of the time, obviously, a legal team would say, great, right? Like this is fine.
Uh-huh.
Um, but so you just yeah, and then you just don't have that process, right? Like they can just not do anything because the default is to get things out, and that's I think it's been really successful actually as a change in attitude. It actually empowers those folks to have a more active role in the process. And on the other hand, it makes the process more efficient. So that's my advice to people, like experiment with breaking up how to make decisions to ship things. Going from this like old world of approvals and process to one where you can, as much as possible, just by default get things out there and learn with that if it was a good idea or not.
Something that like that just sounds so scary, but have courage, everyone, and do it.
Right.
Yes. And where can we find you, by the way? Where can we find you on the internet if we want to learn more?
So I have this unfortunate Twitter handle called Cramforce, but I'm
Uh-huh.
running with it. So I'm on X, I'm on LinkedIn,
Uh-huh.
very, very findable on the internet.
Okay, well, amazing. Well, thank you everyone for listening. Thank you for joining us for the Leadership Exchange podcast. Malta and I will actually be doing an event in Dallas. So if you're listening and you're in Dallas and you are in engineering leadership, uh, send me a message and we'd love to invite you. It's going to be February 11th. And I'm really excited about the panel you're going to be on, Malta, and some bourbon we're going to be drinking. So I should just
Oh,
do a
that's exciting.
podcast on bourbon and wine, but super amazing bourbons. I guess I have to say now there's going to be a Weller 12 year, Heaven Hill 18 year, and then the Joseph Magnus cigar blend, as
I
well
have
as
no
some.
idea what any of that means,
I know,
but
but it'll be fun to try it. And then there will be
Absolutely.
also heavily allocated wines as well that we will be trying. So, uh,
Amazing.
yes, thank you again, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you all next time.